Hello everyone and welcome to Game of the Day, day number 8 here, already the penultimate round of the chess24 Legends of Chess tournament, where we now have already some of our semifinalists determined after today's round. But first we're going to go through today's Game of the Day. The Game of the Day is between Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi. They always have interesting matchups between the two. They have known each other a very long time. They're both born in 1990, so they are just about the same age. I think Jan is a few months older than Magnus. And today they were meeting, both having had a pretty dominant performance in the tournament so far, and the match did not disappoint, going all the way to Armageddon. The game that I have chosen is the game from round 2, the second game that they played today, rather than the fourth game, which could be either one, with Magnus having the white pieces in both cases. These were the two decisive games. And I chose the one in the second round. So without further ado, let's go here. Starts with d4, knight f6, c4, g6. So Jan here plays the Grunfeld. The Grunfeld has been a staple of Magnus's own repertoire with the black pieces for quite a while, although now he plays a lot of other things as well. So, but he was sort of a Grunfeld, through and through for many years. Here, Magnus plays a variation with... So white has a pretty wide choice of lines, but which is now by far more common than the old lines with bishop c4 and knight e2. And here he plays rook b1, which is one of the main moves. I'm not going to walk you through all of the Grunfeld theory because we would be here all day. So I'm just going to start discussing more specifics as we get a few moves past here. But after castles, bishop e2, cd, is the main move. There's also another line here which you may have seen, and I'll just mention it just to kind of help you situate yourself. Sometimes it's good to just kind of get your compass together if you're not a regular Grunfeld player. But knight c6 is the other main move, and then white can play d5, which sacrifices this pawn on c3, and black can either take it, or more often these days I believe they play knight e5, and then there's actually a ton of theory here. Even from this position there's a lot, but usually white plays queen d2 here and the game continues. But in the game, instead of knight c6, black plays the more sort of aggressive way, I guess, here, but it's been played over thousands of games, I believe. cd, queen a5, so which is the most testing way to meet this rook b1 setup, because essentially white is willingly sacrificing this pawn because there's no way, they're not going for the endgame with queen d2 here. So they play bishop d2. This is one of those situations where queen a5 is saying, hey, you got to take it, next move, queen takes a2, castles. And so for the pawn on a2, what does white have? Well, they have been able to maintain their very nice center, and they're ahead in development, and the rook on b1 is well placed to prevent black from moving their bishop. But that being said, the move that black plays here is bishop g4. There is another move, which is b6, has been played by Morozevich among others, It's another, leads to kind of a different character of position. But here bishop g4 is probably the most popular line, and it has been played by Nepomniachtchi in the past. Bishop e3. Yeah, bishop e3 is again the most popular move. There's of course always a lot of different possibilities in all of these positions, so it's very complicated. But rook takes b7 can be met with bishop f3, bishop f3, bishop d4, and I believe this is considered to be more or less okay for black. Still playable for white as well. But here he plays, so Magnus plays bishop e3, which kind of solidifies the pawn on d4. So he prepares. Now white would take on b7 if given a chance. So black plays knight c6, which puts starts counterattacking against the d pawn. White plays d5. Again, this has been played many times. There's in fact a game of Jan Nepomniachtchi himself we're going to go through in a second. Knight to a5, bishop g5, attacking the e7 pawn. Queen a3, the best way to defend it. Rook e1. And now, so it's interesting that Magnus played this way because Jan Nepomniachtchi had a game in this position against Wesley So some time ago, not very long ago, a year and a half ago, where in this position he played bishop takes f3, and queen to d6. And interesting position that's been seen in practice a few times. And now Wesley played e5, which is a difficult move to understand without looking at it. So we got to look at it. And we'll see how that game continued. But Jan managed to make a draw in this game. So after bishop takes e5, white plays queen e2. It's a bit of a weird idea. But here he's attacking. He's starting to attack the e7 pawn if the bishop goes to the wrong square. So black plays bishop f6. And now this is the point of this sort of sacrifice, is he plays bishop to d2. And now the bishop is not only attacking the knight, but potentially coming to b4. And so here black played queen d8. b6 is also possible, by the way. I was analyzing this a little bit. It gets complicated, but white does have play because they're gonna basically win in exchange. The question is whether black can hold that position, which doesn't seem that fun. So in the aforementioned game, black played queen d8, d6, and it's a messy line. Knight c6, e takes d6 was actually possible, and I was wondering whether that might be better. But again, we get this sort of position where queen b5 forces b6, and bishop a8, queen a8. And what is this position? It's probably better for white. But I was wondering if black could just kind of hold, even though they're going to be down the exchange. It doesn't seem easy because, mainly because of that e8 square. It feels like white's going to be able to play like rook e2, rook e1, rook e8, and I don't know. So that's probably why Jan on d6 plays knight c6. And then he does manage to draw, and it seems like a well-played game, actually. Pawn takes e7, and then he takes, they take, and they agree to a draw a little bit early here to be understood, but I think the game could continue something like this, knight f5, and bishop b4, and it seems like white has enough for a pawn here with the two bishops and weakness of f7. The computer gives it as equal, and I guess those guys were so well prepared, they had probably looked at all of this and decided it was a draw. But interesting that today, after rook e1, instead of going for this variation where Jan had held up pretty well, and I don't know if he was thinking that there was an improvement that Magnus would have in this line or something else, but he decides to go for bishop c3. And immediately the computer does not love this move. And one of the reasons is the move that Magnus plays here. And Magnus plays this game from this point on very beautifully. He plays queen to d3. So that's a very natural move, sort of pinning the bishop and preparing to play rook c1, and sometimes preparing to take on e7 and take this bishop on c3. So very natural move. The computer also likes this kind of crazy idea of sacrificing the exchange with knight d4. It's not incredibly convincing to me, but it is interesting. It's definitely pretty good if black just takes the exchange this way, because now their bishop is in a bad spot. If it comes back to c3, we have knight b5. It's going to be probably close to winning. So in this case it works, but I was wondering on knight d4 whether black could maybe simply play bishop takes e2, rook takes e2, and then either take on d4 or just make some other move like queen c5, and I didn't think it was so clear. But Magnus plays queen d3. Rook fc8, normal, defending the bishop one more time. Rook to d1. So here Magnus might be preparing to play e5 in some situations. Black plays b6. h3, posing the question to that bishop. And now he plays bishop d7. It is a question whether bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3. Could have been a little bit more. Try to play and just admit white is of course going to have compensation here with the two bishops and the more space in the center. But black is pretty solid and has good control of the dark square, so it might be a playable position for black. But here he plays bishop d7. Now rook d to c1. So he's starting to harass this bishop, and it's not that easy to figure out what to do with it. And in the game, I think Jan maybe makes a mistake here, although it's very hard to see. It's very hard to see why, and what happens next is sort of a beautiful tactical demonstration by Magnus. So he plays f6, sort of forcing that bishop to come back. And on the next move, so white plays bishop d2, pinning him, and then he plays bishop b2. And so let's look at what could have happened instead of f6. So the main other moves, black has to do something about this bishop. So one idea is to play bishop b2 right away, which is similar to the game, just that the bishop is still on g5 instead of d2, and the pawn is on f7 instead of f6. We'll see from how the game goes that maybe that would have been preferable, because here, if we play the same way as the game, queen a6, it's not quite as clear because the bishop on d2 threatens the knight on a5 in some cases. And also the king is much weaker with the pawn already on f6. So this position is still possibly better for white, but it might be a better chance in the game. So we can look at rook c7, for example, or rook a8. They're both sort of possible. And then it still looks like an awkward position for black, frankly, but maybe it's better than the game. Otherwise, he could try maybe bishop b4, sort of similar idea, just bishop b4 won't be possible with the bishop on d2, because of course the bishop on d2 would just take it. But in this position, it is possible. It looks a little unnatural though to leave that big diagonal. It seems like the king is going to be weak, and so with white here, I would be tempted to keep queens in some way, right? So either by moving that queen somewhere, like queen a6 again, which puts pressure on those squares. There's not necessarily an easy way though for white to, like, queen d4 is possible as well, I guess, but maybe bishop c5 and the bishop just kind of annoys the queen for a while. Not totally trivial, like queen d1, and maybe now you can play f6 and at least the bishop is safe and the king seems safe enough. Maybe it's a playable position for black. So I think maybe this bishop b4 was the best choice. In the game, he plays f6, and now amazingly the rest of the game is almost forced. So Magnus plays bishop d2, pinning that bishop. Clearly Jan had seen this and he was planning to play bishop b2, which he does. Now rook takes c8, queen to a6. So the queen is threatening the pawn on a7, and it's not just that the pawn on a7 falls, it's then b6 might fall, e7 is weak. So the pawn on a7 is more than just a pawn to lose. He plays queen a2, which he was clearly hoping for this move to provide counterplay by attacking the rook. So if the rook moves away, then he's saying at least my bishop is not under attack anymore, and I might be able to defend. But Magnus does not move his rook here. He plays rook takes b2, and this is the beginning of a beautiful combination. Queen takes b2, queen takes a7. So he's attacking the bishop. You can't defend it in a simple way here because rook d8 just simply fails to queen c7, which attacks the rook. There's not a piece that can come to the defense of this. Knight b7 just hangs the knight, and so white would get 2 pieces for a rook here, right? Because they sacrifice the exchange. If they win another piece, that's 2 pieces for the rook. So that's not possible. So Jan was clearly pinning all of his hopes on the check here, queen a1, king h2, and queen a4. So he finds a way to defend that piece. And now it's only because of the next move that Magnus has such a good position, because without it, black would actually be quite okay here. He's up the exchange. If we take like this pawn on b6, Jan gets his knight out. We'll get to trade off one of the bishops and actually probably be better. However, Magnus has a beautiful move here. He plays bishop to d1. Now this move attacks the queen, And the queen is not going to be able to defend this bishop very easily. If it goes to b5, then knight d4 attacks the queen. The bishop behind is hanging, and so white is winning material here because the rook will be attacked behind, so you don't have time to take this knight. So Jan has no choice really but to take on d1. And by the way, the commentary team here was kind of amazed by Magnus's play. It is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful game here with sort of two successive, sacrifices leading to a position that's just surprisingly bad for black. So black takes on d1, queen takes d7. He's attacking the rook. Queen c2 looks like the best move to try to defend and potentially bring the queen back. He gives a check. The check is important because he doesn't necessarily want to play queen takes e7 because queen c7 will trade queens and you're still up the exchange for black. So this would actually be good for black. So, but Magnus has queen e6 and the rest, Magnus plays the rest of this game perfectly. King h8. King f8 would not be very good. I think the cleanest might be bishop to b4, threatening queen takes f6, threatening something on e7. Looks like the cleanest. I think the computer also likes to move d6. Actually, d6 is pretty good too because on pawn takes d6, there's bishop h6 mate. So I had written down both. So here black plays king h8. Now d6. So he doesn't let, d6 is a really key move in these positions because he doesn't let black play queen c7 and trade. So d6 takes that square away. Black doesn't have a lot of options here. If you let white play pawn takes e7, it's just going to be game over because that pawn will be just too strong. So he takes it. Queen takes f6 check. The king goes to g8. Bishop h6 threatens checkmate. You can't come up with the rook because that would leave the f8 square undefended. So he plays queen c7. Now, queen e6 check. Very nice move, forcing the king to the corner. It's always nice when you can force the king back there. The queen can't come to f7 because of queen takes c8 with mate. So he's got to go king h8. And now knight g5. After this move, black actually resigned because there is really no defense. The threat is to play knight f7, check. Well, we can look at it. Let's say black plays b5 just as a move that doesn't do anything. The threat is knight f7, king g8. Knight d8 check, discovered check. The king only has one square, and now our knight is in the way of the rook. This is a typical kind of theme, so you can play queen e8 mate. So black resigned because there's nothing useful here. Instead of b5, let's say d5 check doesn't do anything. You can play either e5 or just g3, and then the threat is renewed. And yeah, there's really nothing else. So pretty amazing game here, starting with the move bishop d2, and then really the two sacrifices here. Rook takes b2, and then 2 moves later, bishop d1, really a beautiful clearing move, and followed by the attack. And so the question remains, why did Jan play the move bishop c3? Maybe he was hoping to catch Magnus off guard, plays very, very fast, a lot of preparation, but it didn't quite pan out. I'm still curious to know if in this line there's an improvement for white on bishop takes f3, the sort of chess scientist in me who likes to try to figure out these openings and what and why these chess superstars are playing these lines. I'm certainly wondering why he deviated from a game that was a successful game for him. So that is today's game of the day, where Magnus Carlsen continues to lead the tournament. Although Jan did give him a run for his money. If you want to look at another fun game, you can look at the Jan Nepomniachtchi win against Magnus today with the black pieces on demand, winning in the 4th game to force Armageddon. I didn't choose it because it does start with a lot of Magnus's problems begin with a blunder at some point. You saw his face kind of go berserk after he did it. But there were some other cool games today between Kramnik and Zvidler, for example. So do go to our broadcast page on chess24.com and check out today's games. Keep in mind that you have access to all sorts of tools if you're a premium member that you don't have access to otherwise, like cloud analysis, being able to download the games, and so on and so forth. So do consider that. We do, I'll say it once more because I think it's actually too good to be true almost. You can use the code SIMUL to renew or become a premium member for 2 years, and you are guaranteed to play Magnus Carlsen. It's in a SIMUL, which is worth the cost of admission, if only for that, not to mention all the other benefits. So that's my sales pitch for today. Thanks for tuning in, guys and ladies, and I will see you all tomorrow.